I think it's time I wrap up what I would do for my ideal Pokemon game. If you're new to this channel, in this series I've been going over some ideas that I have that I think would make Pokemon better. I recommend you check out the other two videos in the series. In the first one, I go over some big picture ideas. I would really like to see main series games have more variety in art style, in game structure, in everything, really. But I would also really like to see the games, all games, developed with good writing as a bigger priority. And that's good writing at all levels. In the second video, I focused on my idea for a gym system that would actually teach competitive play and some other battling related elements. And actually, after that video went out, I thought of some more battling related things, and so I'm going to focus on those first. You may remember that I used footage from Pokemon Stadium 2 in the last video, and while I was recording that, there were a number of things that when I saw them, I was like, that was so good, that needs to come back, that needs to come back. Like the animation of a move actually playing even if the move misses. Or a Pokemon that used Fly still being visible on the battlefield just up in the air. These feel like really simple things, but they did really make stadium battles feel more natural. But the one thing that made those battles really special was the announcer. There was battle commentary, there was a reaction to what was happening on the battlefield. But it was more than just text like you'd get from Hop if you do a super effective hit or something. It was also more than just the wordless cheering from the audience. It made battles way more exciting, but just as importantly, if you got tired of the commentary, you could turn it off. If you've been watching me for a while, you know that I don't like easy battles, and I definitely don't like unfair advantages. So in my ideal Pokemon game, you would not be able to have a Pokemon endure a hit, or do a critical hit, or recover from a status condition early just because of high friendship. Up until Ultra, friendship was separate from the stat that you'd get from Pokemon Ami or Pokemon Refresh that was called affection. And it was high affection that would give you those added battle effects. So if you didn't use Pokemon Ami or Refresh, you didn't get those effects. But as of Let's Go, affection got combined with regular friendship, which on the one hand is great because conceptually there was no reason for those things to be separate, but on the other hand, it meant that I had no way of avoiding the effects of affection. And so Fergie, my Barraskewda, endured a hit on I think 2 major battles, and I really don't like that because it makes things too easy. But also because my opponents don't get access to those effects. If they did, that would make for more unpredictable battles, which may or may not be a good thing depending on your personal tolerance for RNG, but it would make battles fairer. And to segue neatly into some story-related things that I want to talk about, which characters get those added effects could be tied to whether or not they are a good trainer. So if my Barraskewda can endure a hit, surely Leon's Charizard can too. On the story side, something that would be really important to me would be for your losses to actually be acknowledged. It was really weird losing my first battle against Piers, and then going back in and having this punk surrounded by a crowd of his adoring fans not shit-talk me for coming right back in. I lost the championship match, and nobody said anything. I lost against Eternatus. I missed my one chance to save the world, and somehow nothing happened. Now, I get that in Pokemon there's this sort of chosen one narrative where the player character is supposed to be a really special and unique trainer, and so for plot purposes, the player character can't really canonically lose, so you just kind of reset and try again. But I see an inherent conflict between that and character customization. When you're playing a Mario game, you're playing Mario, a set character with his own personality, and you're just guiding him through the world. But when you play a modern Pokemon game, you're really playing as yourself. Your in-game character is just an avatar of yourself, or of some other character that you've imagined. Really, it can be anyone. So I see that at odds with that chosen one narrative. If you can be anyone, how can you be a chosen one? The only time that you weren't given a choice of who to play was Generation 1. And Red, the player character from Generation 1, is also the only player character that has actually become canonical, that has made a return appearance in a future game. So Red is like a chosen one, like not actually chosen by anything, but like he's a special character. After that, like there is a version of Generation 2 where there is a choice, where it might not have been Ethan, it might have been Chris. And so all of the later generations, you are given that choice, and none of those characters have become canonical. I didn't say it as well as the first time. We weren't recording. I'll try it again. So I would like to see those journey setbacks be acknowledged and just become part of the story. Just like Hop had his streak of losses and then recovered from it, the main character can have the same. I also want to see a significant number of returning characters in every game. They don't have to be very important characters every time, and they certainly don't need to have major roles in the plot. They definitely shouldn't just show up, give you an item, and leave. Chorus? I mean, major involvement with the plot would be cool sometimes, but just the occasional cameo would be great. It would really help each region feel more connected to the rest of the series, even if, as I've mentioned before, the art style and the structure of the game is different every time. Something that Sword and Shield really lacked was that connection. There were very few references to other parts of the Pokemon world, other events in series history, and that was a big contrast from Alola or even the version of Kanto in the Let's Go games. And something else that would help with that connection is collectible, readable books like in Skyrim. The thing that Sword and Shield gave me hope for and then crushed it by not letting you go into the bookstore or even browse the books that are on display on the outside. Like, imagine being able to read Sonia's book on Galar history, or buy a book of Professor Oak's poems. There's so much that they could put into those books of history, of culture of the Pokemon world, of character backstories. It's never going to happen, but let me fantasize, let me dream! As you're out exploring the Pokemon world, I would love to see Pokemon moving naturally in the overworld. Something similar to the style and frequency of animal spawns in Breath of the Wild. You'd need a really big, wide space for that to work, but the game doesn't need to be open world per se. It just needs to be expansive with lots of room for exploration. I actually loved what Sword and Shield did with a mix of overworld and random encounters. I like that, but I would just thin out the overworld a bit, give them more space. But shiny Pokemon have to appear in the overworld. It makes no sense for a shiny to appear normal in the overworld. Having a Pokemon follow you, walk with you in the overworld would be nice. I actually really liked the way Let's Go did it, where you could have any Pokemon in your party out, or even none of them, except I guess the partner Pikachu or Eevee. But again, I would just want them to move more naturally and not disappear when you jump a ledge or bump into a building. Ride Pokemon would definitely make a comeback. I think the best way to do Ride Pokemon and field moves, or HMs, would be, one, that you can ride any Pokemon that is large enough, like it was in Let's Go. And two, your own Pokemon have field abilities that can help you explore the world, but they don't need to be in your party. Maybe there's a ride pager type of thing that you can register your own Pokemon to. And Pokemon would not necessarily be limited to just one ability, especially with an ability like going up a waterfall. It wouldn't really make sense to go up a waterfall on a Pokemon that you can't also ride on in the water. These field abilities wouldn't be tied to moves or anything, they would just be innate to the Pokemon. There's two ways that I can see this working. One, the Pokemon can do it, but it needs to be taught how. So you need to reach a certain point in the game in order to unlock an ability, say Rock Smash. So now all of your Pokemon that would be able to break rocks can. Or the other option is that there's nothing to teach. The Pokemon just have that ability by default. But the Pokemon that you can find in the wild are carefully curated to give you access to new areas at the right time. I was told this is how the Ranger games worked, but I've never played those games, so I don't really know for sure. Something the early games did really well was tease you with areas that you couldn't access. There would be a tree in the way or a pitch black cave and nothing you could do about it until later. And then you go, oh, I can get past that thing now, I should go check it out. So I picture you going past these huge boulders or something and not being able to push them aside until much later when you get final stage fighting type or something. And then you go back and you see what those boulders were hiding. And maybe some of them were blocking access to some rare Pokemon. I just wanted to quickly touch on the topic of varied and unique games. That applies to the regions themselves as well. There's no need to have a desert area and a snowy area and a jungle area in every region. Like, if I made a region based on the Amazon, you're just gonna get jungle, rivers, and cities. There's no need for anything else. You can still find a place to put ice Pokemon and fire Pokemon or whatever, but you don't need to have every habitat in every game. Puzzles have always been a thing in Pokemon, but they're relatively minor if you compare to the number of puzzles that you have in a Zelda game, for example. And I would like to see more puzzles, whether as part of gym missions or just strength puzzles or something, but I would also like those puzzles to range in difficulty. Think of the Shrine Trials in Breath of the Wild. Some of those are pretty straightforward, some just take a few minutes to figure out, some take a lot of trial and error. And the puzzles could even require you to use some of your Pokemon's field moves. To finish off, I wanted to touch on the idea of multi-track progression. What I mean by that is there being multiple ways to progress through the game, like a battle track, a contest track, and maybe a research track, for example. I like the idea of having those options, but I think it would only really work well in a proper open world game. Something like Skyrim and how you can focus on different abilities. You can focus entirely on magic and never have to touch a weapon, but you can also change your mind and switch to weapons eventually. But I do think that it's possible to have some of that in a Pokemon game without going full-blown open world. You would have one primary track, say the gym challenge and battling, since that's what it's always been, and that's the one that guides your progress through the story. But you would also have optional tracks with major milestones that you can either focus on for a little bit before going back to the gyms, or you complete the game and then you still have a lot to do. There was some of this as early as Generation 1, because there were certain items that were important but ultimately optional that you could only get for completing a certain amount of your Pokedex. So that was kind of the research track. But Gen 3 is when it worked best for me. I spent a lot of time in Ruby doing contests, mostly after becoming the champion. Contests weren't perfect, but I liked that different challenge, that different way of using moves, and I really wanted to get my Pokemon's portraits up in Lily Cove Museum. But Ruby and Sapphire did contests better than Emerald, I thought, because in Emerald they were all confined to a single location, whereas in Ruby and Sapphire you got access to contest ranks as you progress through the story. So you could pursue the battle and the contest tracks at the same time, or you could ignore contests and go back to them later. So something like that, but expanded, would be wonderful. It would give you a lot to do both in the main game and in the post game as well. Whew, that was a lot. If you watched all 3 episodes of the series, thank you for sticking with me. If you haven't, the link to the playlist will be in the end card. I don't think there's anything else that I want to cover, but I wouldn't be surprised if I think of something else, or if someone in a comment has a really great idea that I want to talk about. And if that's the case, there may be more videos in this series. If you enjoy my videos, I would really appreciate it if you could click the like button. It helps get this video in front of more eyeballs. And if you're new here, I hope you'll watch more of my videos, and please consider subscribing. Thank you to my patrons, especially luxury patron Ethan Saffron. I'm Umbrian Libris. I'll see you in the next chapter.
Congratulations! The champion has been decided!
I hope there's not been like a very noticeable cat hair just hanging out on my face this whole time.